Russia captures Chernobyl and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer, and the millennial Lauren Aricon. She's back. She's 10. She's rested. Here she is.
Woo, hey, thanks for having me.
Welcome back. So, in a great irony, Russia captures Chernobyl in the Ukraine, and we have an incredibly dumbest bills in America, which, by the way, our guest, Lauren Aricon, is part of. It's not her bill, but she's the one that has exposed how dumb this bill is. You have to wait to hear how bad it is. So first up, podcast listeners, we have this story. So you can't believe it. So in the Daily Caller, Chernobyl power plant has been captured by the Russians, according to the Ukrainians. Well, why is this important? Because the Soviet Union is the one that essentially caused the Chernobyl power plant to literally blow up in and of itself because of the poor construction, the poor maintenance, the poor, monitoring, everything about it. It was the Soviets that caused this to happen, and the entire region around Chernobyl is radioactive, but for whatever reason, the Russians have decided to capture it, which I'm not exactly sure why, but they just reported this today in the Daily Caller. So it says, Russian forces have reportedly captured the Chernobyl power plant. I think that's pronounced Chernobyl, excuse me. I actually watched, did you see that movie?
I haven't,
I think it was a Netflix series called Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And obviously it showed how incredibly stupid and apparatchik the Russians were when they let this happen.
Yep.
So anyway, the Russians did take over this region early today, according to the folks in the Ukraine. And I'm not really sure why they want it. And it doesn't really explain why they want it. What do you think about this?
Yeah, this is really disturbing. I mean, that whole place is just a toxic wasteland. What strategic move is this that Russia's doing, unless they know that there's something there that the rest of us don't know is there?
Yeah, maybe there's like really valuable nuclear waste that they're trying to get a hold of. I'm not really sure. It's really hard to know around the Chernobyl area. I've forgotten how large the square miles are around Chernobyl, where humans are not huge. Actually supposed to be living or going into that area, because they would be exposed to very serious amounts of actual radiation. So podcast listeners, I'm really proud to say that we've talked about this before in the podcast about Russia and the threat to the Ukraine. Now they, of course, have invaded and taken over Chernobyl, among many other areas in the Ukraine. But the Russians were also the same folks who caused the Holodomor in the Ukraine. And the Holodomor, which very few people know about, was also called the Terror Famine or the Great Famine, which was a famine in the Soviet Ukraine, which then the Soviet Union controlled, so Ukraine, from 1932 to 1933, that killed millions of Ukrainians. It was a large part of the wider Soviet famine, which took place. So in other words, it was man-made, and it was intentionally man-made by the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union, of course, through Stalin, made this happen to try to get the Ukraine and the countryside, people that live in the countryside, under control by collectivizing farms.
Yeah.
And as a result, there was no food.
Of course.
And so they said, oh, you grew corn this year? You grew wheat this year? That's great. Give us the wheat. Give us the corn. And we will let you know what your food allocation is. And meanwhile, there wasn't any. And they intentionally did this. So now the good old Russians are back, except they're not called Soviets, but they were Russians. Russians are Russians. And they are back under Putin invading Ukraine.
They're going to do the same thing that happened before. I mean, look, Mao Zedong did this to the Chinese. This is just another method of warfare if you're into fighting dirty and just genocidal, basically. And this is exactly what they're going to do. You know, we have some of these socialists that still look up to these, and they serve with us. And I talked to some of them yesterday about this stuff. And they were still extolling the virtues of socialism to me. And I said, look.
What do you mean they serve with us? Oh, you mean in the Maryland legislature?
In the legislature. Oh, yeah.
They are socialists, yeah.
And I said, right. I look forward to when, you have the opportunity to implement these grand socialist plans, because, I won't be working at all. And he was like, no, you'll still work because you like producing. And I said, no, I don't. I like eating.
Well, the socialists really like to call themselves progressives in the United States. They're not socialists, they're progressives. But really effectively what they are they're socialists. And it is a very awful form of kind of, what Putin is putting forth. They don't think so, by the way. But of course, and we'll get to this later in the podcast where Joy Reid actually decides to call Republicans pro-Putin, which is so funny, right? It's just ridiculous. Oh, but the fact of the matter is, when you serve with people who are progressives, they actually believe that they should control every aspect of the economy, which is really kind of like communism.
Oh, it is communism. Absolutely. They believe that a dictatorship, just like Justin Trudeau believes, dictatorships are easier. They're easier to control people. And they're right. I guess they are. When we're starving and no one wants to get off their butt to do a job, sure, it's way easier then.
Exactly. And so, podcast listeners, Russian soldiers were on Tinder just before the invasion. What is Tinder?
It's an app for young people to find booty, I guess. It's a booty call app.
Is that a millennial app?
It must be. I've never had an account. I've been married since I was 21.
Yeah, sure. So Tinder apparently is an app that you go on when you want to get lucky, right?
Yeah, I think it's like, oh yeah, that's right. It's a straight version of Grindr. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the Russian soldiers, according to Daily Caller, were on Tinder in the Ukraine prior to the invasion starting. So here they are, with all their tanks lined up and so forth. They're on Tinder taking pictures of themselves going, wow, we're getting ready to invade. Guess what happens next? And so we have a picture we're going to put up on social media, including, of course, on our YouTube and the other channel, Rumble, that we have, where if you're watching, if you're listening, you can't see it. And it's this Russian soldier. He's kind of like in a T-shirt, this hunky dude, and he's taking a picture of him and trying to look really suave and all that stuff. Guess what I'm going to do? And the thing is that these soldiers are doing this. Why?
Because they love to rape and pillage once they get into town.
Literally. That's what it is. Podcast listeners, it's literally what it is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's disgusting.
The difference between a brutal regime like Putin, okay, and the West is with Putin, he believes that you just tell the soldiers, hey, look, one of your rewards is you get to rape, burn, and pillage when you get into the Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So these guys are literally trying to hook up with people inside of the Ukraine. And there's another part of warfare too, and that is they want to impregnate as many non-Russian people as they can.
Right.
Because this is part of who Putin is. It's disgusting.
Yeah. It's third world, and it's like 1,000 years in the past, but here we are today. And these poor women, I mean, can you imagine if you're a young woman right now in Ukraine? That's scary. I mean, this is psychological warfare of the threat.
And this story, by the way, Lauren, in the Daily Caller said that many women who saw this on Tinder, they decided to say, because they already had profiles in Tinder, they changed their profiles to say that they were living somewhere other than in the town that they live.
Smart.
Certainly Ukrainian and living in the Ukraine, but put different towns because they were terrified of what might happen. And so once again, we're going to show this picture on YouTube. It's this dude. He's got this blue and white striped, I guess, T-shirt, if you will. I'm not sure what you would call this. And he's got kind of a green beret cap on top, looking all hunky and so forth. And this tells you, folks, exactly who the Russians are. Not all of the Russian people, but the Russian military. And the fact that Putin is basically telling them, hey, make sure you do this. This is okay. Because obviously in the U.S. military, if you did something like this,
my gosh.
I mean, you'd be...
Can you even imagine?
Yeah, you'd be
if our
kicked out
soldiers
right away.
had Tinder accounts in the cities that they were invading? Come on.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just...
What else would it mean?
Yeah, exactly. I'm coming for you. I mean, that's just so gross.
And so next up, podcast listeners, CNN messes up again. CNN, you won't believe this, had a breaking story, okay? Not a surprise. The breaking story is Russia formally attacks Ukraine. And then, while they have this breaking story on CNN, they have an Applebee's commercial with a split screen, right? So it goes from full screen, Russia invades Ukraine. And naturally, if you're a CNN viewer, you're watching the TV and you're thinking, wow, pretty soon someone's going to come on to tell me what's really happening. And so, we interrupt this program with this breaking story and this big, chyron there. Whoops, this big chyron is there and it's telling you what's happening. And then an Applebee's commercial comes on. We have a clip on this. You can't believe it. This is how badly CNN needs commercials. Here it is.
little bit of chicken fried. Cold beer on a Friday night. A pair of jeans that fit just right.
So I'm sorry. So that's CNN. When you're CNN, you'll do anything, to make some money because like hardly anyone's watching, but they figure that lots of people are tuning in because this is breaking news, which is probably true that more people are, watching them because it's breaking news. And then they're like, we're going to take advantage of this. Brought to you by Applebee's, which is just ridiculous.
The Russian invasion brought to you by chicken fried steak.
That's right.
So embarrassing.
Are you worried about the Ukraine? Then come to Applebee's and celebrate. Oh, yes. We have 2 for 1 tonight. Oh, my gosh. You have no idea. And by the way, let's all celebrate the Holodomor while we're at it,
Yeah, exactly.
And believe me, I say that because it's just so disgusting, right? Because the Russians did that Holodomor. They imposed this famine on the Ukraine. Yeah. And then the CNN is so stupid that they have an Applebee's commercial. Can we do this Applebee's commercial again with CNN? Yeah. So first up, before you start, listen to this podcast, listeners. You have the breaking news and the sirens, right? Because Russia's invading, and then Applebee's is advertising at the same time. Here it is.
And a little bit of chicken fried. Cold beer on a Friday night. A pair of jeans that fit just right.
So there you go again. Chicken fried chicken at Applebee's. Come celebrate the invasion.
It's so terrifying. How tone deaf are they?
They're so stupid.
So desperate.
They really are. And I think this really tells you what CNN is about. Obviously, it's a money-making operation, but increasingly they're in such financial trouble that they're willing to do just about anything. That's always the danger in the media, right? When they're willing to basically sell out to anyone that is willing to give them a few bucks so that they can get their misinformation out there.
Yeah, it's really very scary. And it happens not just CNN. There's like MSNBC, and they're all bad. But they're all doing the same Applebee's commercials.
And to be clear, podcast listeners, we want to say with this particular segment that we stand with the people of the Ukraine, obviously, and we think what the Russians did back in the 30s with the Holodomor is awful and so forth. But we also think that CNN is run by a bunch of idiots who would actually do this. And it shows you, why are you watching CNN? Why do people watch CNN?
I don't
Lauren,
nobody is watching CNN. They need a war. Maybe they're probably behind the war just so that they love war. They've been begging for the war because they need to get their viewership up. Seriously.
Something has to happen. I mean, I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I have to admit that with CNN, maybe they'll shut down. Maybe someone will buy them that actually is responsible.
And I doubt that somebody responsible will buy them. Probably some other inbred in their weird club of MSNBC and make-believe world. Somebody like that might buy them up, but they're going to continue to just make stuff up.
Of course they are. Yeah, exactly. So next up, podcast listeners, MSNBC's Joy Reid race baits on the Ukraine. Oh, isn't that really hard to believe? So here you have Russia invading the Ukraine. And MSNBC's Joy Reid decides to do what? She decides to blame Republicans because they love Putin. But wait a minute. Who's in the White House, Lauren?
I know. It's Biden.
I'm
Sleepy
so confused.
Joe.
Yeah. So first up, we're going to listen to the clip, then we're going to discuss it. Here is Joy Reid. Here it is.
This also marks an ironic pivot for the party that was literally built on decrying Soviet communism, including accusing civil rights leaders of being a fifth column, siding with the communist enemy against American greatness. Well, it turns out, okay, yes, there is a fifth column, and it's right inside the Republican Party and their media apparatus, which apparently, clearly, has fallen in love with Russian autocratic kleptocracy. And by legitimizing Putin and advancing his goals here at home, they have officially broken with their former patron saint, Ronald Reagan, who famously called Soviet Russia an evil empire.
There we go. So it's hard to believe, okay, that you just heard what you heard, but that's Joy Reid saying that it's the Russians who are coordinating with Putin and the Republican Party. So it's Putin, who's Russian, obviously, and the Russian government. They're coordinating with the Republican Party to do what? To invade the Ukraine because it's about white people. What?
What?
I mean, who are these people?
No.
And meanwhile, it was the Democrat Party who broke in to the White House, because when you break into servers into the White House, you've effectively broken into the White House.
Yep.
And then planted information on servers, okay, And then that information tried to link the president of the United States to, of course, Russia and Putin. And CNN is still, and MSNBC too, but mostly MSNBC, they're still talking about this, Mark.
And it failed. It failed. And I mean, they were planting their own evidence and it still didn't stick because it was so outlandish and such crap. I mean, this is embarrassing. This is embarrassing for our country, but who's in charge of our country right now? It's not us. Republicans aren't in charge of the country. So how could it possibly be our secret plan? We've never liked Putin. My goodness.
And you should see the dolts that they have on this MSNBC program when she interviews them. I mean, they all look like Russian tools. I mean, or just blinded to what's really happening in society. I mean, do they pay them to go on there?
I'm sure.
And say these things? I got to wonder.
Yeah.
So once again, in the Daily Caller, and by the way, shout out to the Daily Caller because they are using Rumble exclusively now. They're not using YouTube. And I think that is
nice.
a really good thing. So MSNBC's Joy Reid suggested that Republicans were openly supportive of Putin's invasion Wednesday on the readout. I guess that's what they call it now, the readout, like, Joy Reid. I don't know.
Oh, my.
Quote, I have come to expect very little from Republican Party, to be blunt, Reid said. I understand that they prefer autocracy. They want a white nationalist autocracy in the United States. They believe that white Christians are beleaguered and need to rule the United States without elections. Got it? This is really, at this point, open, end quote. Folks, that's Joy Reid of MSNBC. That's her take on the Russian invasion of the Ukraine.
This is not even a little bit shocking, though. I mean, this is kind of where we knew they were going to go eventually. They want to make us the boogeyman, and they don't care if they have to lie, cheat, and steal. They'll just message their crap and peddle it every day. Luckily, people they're not believing it. I mean, we're seeing change, I think. I think people are starting to wake up to the crap that she's serving.
I sure hope so, because here's what I have to think. When people are watching Joy Reid and MSNBC, isn't that language radicalization of their viewers? They're
Absolutely.
radicalizing their viewers.
Yeah, it's brainwashing. It's brainwashing. And here's the really scary part. Mark, our own government has probably been the one behind the research into how to do this stuff. It's just scary that now the propaganda machine is our actual media companies, and they're using the 1960s brain research that our taxpayer dollars paid for, and they're using it against us.
It's just unbelievable that, I know we always say this on Mark and the Millennials, we have people that watch this podcast and listen to it from both parties, Democrat and Republican. And if you're a Democrat and you listen to this podcast, thank you very much. We know it probably isn't easy for you and you get triggered on a regular basis. And we're quite happy about that. By the way, we will often make fun of Republicans on the podcast as well, especially their dumbest bills.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the thing. To listen to MSNBC's Joy Reid and say that it's about race when you have one white country invading another white country and saying it's the Republican Party that's coordinating with them. I mean, you would have to really have lost your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have. And also they know that they've kind of hypnotized, a huge segment of their voting population. So they know that they can get away with saying this stuff. It's just, the young people, the millennials are waking up, and I don't think they're believing it anymore. And the poll numbers are telling us they're not.
Thank goodness. And the hypnotizing comment you made, I really like that, because I actually do believe that the constant repetition on some of these news media, about certain issues, almost seems like they are trying to hypnotize people.
Absolutely. There's good brain research into how to change people's minds about things. I mean, even when you're young and you're memorizing things, they tell you if you say something 7 times, you remember it. People on MSNBC and CNN are getting it a lot more than 7 times, and they think it's real.
They do. Absolutely. So next up, podcast listeners, guess who's buying Russian oil? We are.
Unbelievable.
Guess who's buying Russian oil? First, though, oil soars beyond $100 per barrel for the first time since 2014, when Obama was in office. The worldwide price of crude oil skyrocketed to more than $100 a barrel for the first time since 2014 as Russia launched a full-scale offensive against Ukraine. The Brent crude index, the global oil benchmark, hit 101.66 per barrel Thursday morning, surging more than 4% overnight. The U.S. WTI index, skyrocketed nearly 7% to $98.69 per barrel Thursday, its highest level since 2014. On Wednesday evening, Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation in a separatist region in the Ukraine, which, of course, they say started the latest round of oil increases. And then, in the National Review, why is the U.S. still importing so much Russian oil and petroleum products?
Unbelievable.
And here it is. Here's a flashing neon sign that the U.S. energy policy has gone terribly, terribly wrong. Throughout 2021, the U.S. has imported 12 million to 26 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products per month from Russia, the same country we keep enacting new sanctions on in an effort to deter Putin's territorial ambitions.
How are we green right now under Biden exactly? Under Trump, we were exporters of oil, and now we're importing Russian oil when we're about to go to war with them. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And Joy Reid of MSNBC thinks it's the Republicans. They're the ones who are coordinating with Putin.
Secret Republicans creating white-on-white crime.
I'm just sorry, but, the last administration, we were energy independent.
Yeah.
And now suddenly, we're not energy independent. We are energy dependent on Russia.
On the people we're going to be spending a lot of money to fight. Perfect. Perfect. Brilliant plan.
Something doesn't sound quite right with this. The most recent month from Energy Information Agency's figures in November 2021, at 17.8 million barrels last spring, imports of Russian oil hit the highest level in a decade in August. Russia became the second highest exporter of oil to the United States. The second highest exporter of oil to the U.S.
Unbelievable.
You think that might be a reason Putin feels so confident, Lauren?
I think that would be part of it. Yeah, that, and also I think he knows that Sleepy Joe can't find the button to release the missiles anyways because he's not all there.
I mean, Sleepy Joe has time and again messed up our economy. I mean, we have inflation that's the highest since the 1970s during the Carter administration. And it was the Reagan administration that tamed inflation. And now we have inflation, which is literally government made.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are dependent on the rest of the world for so many things.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to keep asking yourself, what kind of country would, or what kind of leadership of a country like the United States would do this to itself?
I think one that's not loyal. I mean, I think a lot of these globalists and the Democrat Party, unfortunately, has become globalist. They don't care about our borders. They are self-interested. They're narcissists. They don't care if America is great. That was what was so special about Trump. He brought in the Democrats from other places in this country that still believe in America. And the party now is just, the Democrats are devoid of that. They don't think we're valuable. They don't want borders. They want globalism. And so, going to war with the same country that you're buying oil from, or the same country where all of your drugs are manufactured in, thank you, China, that just makes total sense if you're a crazy globalist, if you don't give a crap about America.
That's good stuff. And to prove the point, next up, Canada lifts their false state of emergency. As you know, Trudeau put in a state of emergency because the truckers were really dangerous. They were driving tanks. Of course, they weren't. And comparing that to the Ukraine, which established a real state of emergency. So you have Trudeau, who finally lifts the state of emergency against the dangerous truckers, and the Ukraine, which actually puts in a real state of emergency because they have tanks rolling across the border.
Yeah.
I just think this is interesting, this compare and contrast between these two things.
Oh, yeah. Trudeau is such a sissy. And then wasn't that a funny turnaround?
Do you see that as a millennial? Do you see him as a sissy man? Because as a guy, I see him as a total sissy man.
He's a total metrosexual. I mean,
he is. I agree. Yeah. That's what I see him the same way.
Yeah,
it's like
not ordering off perfect. That menu. Yeah, that's no.
Yeah, because he doesn't go to a barber. He totally goes to like a hairstylist where, he sits there for 3 hours at a time like women do.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about
it. Gets the hair colored and then like super coiffed, has his nails done.
Oh, I would not be shocked if we find out he goes to a manicurist.
Probably has a facial at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way I see him too.
Pores cleansed. So gross.
I mean, why not? Why wouldn't he?
Let them eat cake, Mark. Let them eat cake.
Oh, absolutely.
But not the truckers because they're un-Canadian.
Yeah, the truckers, no, because they're dangerous because they drive a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And there are actually anti-war protests in Moscow, which is interesting. That is to say, there are Russians in Moscow and others, of course, who are protesting Russia's war with the Ukraine. And that's breaking news as well, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, here's the other interesting part about that. As you can imagine, Putin will not put up with that.
I know. I was going to say,
Okay.
are they allowed to protest in Russia still?
Well, no, that's the whole point. You see, Lauren, they're not allowed to protest in Canada either.
True story. Don't worry. They're going to steal all their bank accounts soon. Freeze them all.
They can't protest in Canada.
Yeah.
They can't protest in Russia. And the last I checked, the truckers are not allowed to protest here in the United States either, because they're not going to be allowed to go downtown Washington, D.C.
Yeah, that's crazy.
When they get to Washington, D.C., the truckers, the American Trucker Freedom Convoy, they're going to be prohibited from going into the city from the Capitol Beltway, which is that circle beltway that circles the Washington Capitol region.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're not going to let them do that.
That's crazy. I mean, how can that even be legal? So what, are we going to have a state of emergency in the Capitol so that no one can use the roads?
I think that's what they're
paid
going to do.
for?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
going to be like a state of emergency. And I've heard, at least I've read, that the Pentagon has authorized the National Guard to block off all of the streets that go downtown to the Capitol so that these freedom-loving truckers from the United States can't go downtown. So here you have people who are just wanting freedom in the United States from mandates and people getting involved in their healthcare decisions. And that's really what they want. They want the freedom to work. And of course, they're not able to really peacefully protest and make their point in front of the Capitol and the White House.
That's embarrassing. I mean, what kind of democracy do we have? We can't even petition our government when we're pissed. I mean,
And
that's the whole point of it.
By the way, they just put fencing up too around the Capitol.
Oh, so
Brand
they do
new
believe
fencing.
in walls. Oh my God, Mark. Walls work? Stop it.
But we're worried about the Ukraine. You know,
Uh-oh.
we're really worried about what's happening
We're
there.
going to put some soldiers at the edge of the Ukrainian walls.
Exactly.
We want to make sure their
Precisely.
borders are protected. Don't worry about the South. Shh.
And I have to say this, podcast listeners, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations gave one huge punch to his Russian counterpart. And so here's the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations basically giving it to the Russian ambassador. And you have to listen to the last words of this. It's a short clip, and here it is.
Well, as I said, relinquish your duties as a chair. Call Putin, call Lavrov to stop aggression. And I welcome the decision of some members of this council to meet as soon as possible to consider the necessary decision that would condemn the aggression that you launch on my people. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
That's awesome. There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell. And that is the Ukrainian UN ambassador to his Russian counterpart. Amazing.
Mic drop. That
Yeah.
was beautiful.
Was that great?
I'm going to get a bumper sticker that says that.
Exactly. And I just think that in as much as I'm just saying, me personally, don't want the United States to get involved directly in a conflict and a war with Russia, because I do not want that. I don't want that. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't care about the people of the Ukraine and their plight against the constant aggressor of Russia, which has throughout history constantly subjugated those people.
Oh yeah, those people and all the others. I mean, I was in the Republic of Georgia a few years ago, and there are places that we couldn't travel because Russia had taken little chunks of that poor country too, and they had just gotten rid of them like not that long ago. So yeah, they've been doing this for years. Anybody who thinks that Republicans support Russia or Russia interference in other people's borders and in sovereignty, no, I'm sorry, we just don't. That doesn't mean we want to send our sons over there right now. But there are a lot of things that we can do to help mitigate the disaster that's about to break out. I mean, if we don't handle this right, if Sleepy Joe stays asleep on the job, we could we're looking at World War III.
Absolutely. And the thing is there's this term in economics called economic autarky, which means economic self-sufficiency. And we were trying to get to that under the previous administration. And I know this is going to trigger a lot of people out there who are anti-Trumpers who listen to our podcast. But here's the thing. This guy was, Trump was he was very gregarious in some ways, but in most ways, let's face it, his language was difficult and made a lot of people upset. And in many cases, it may have been founded, right? But he was the first president to set a new course for the United States and recognized that we need economic autarky, economic independence, and economic self-sufficiency. And now we look at where we are in the world, and we are in a very dangerous place because it's not just about Russia now.
No.
It's really about Russia and China.
Exactly.
Coordinating and communicating with one another.
Yeah.
And apparently there's even, Lauren, some interesting reports that are out there that President Xi of China is censoring any negative coverage of the Russian invasion for obvious reason. Because naturally, any coverage that's going to be talked about in China is going to be about how wonderful the invasion is.
Oh, yeah, of course, because the Ukrainians that stole their own country from Russia once. Come on. What is the justification for this?
Exactly. Because
it used to be ours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We used to control it under the good old days of the Soviet Union when people didn't have enough food when they went to the grocery store, which is true, by the way. You know what? That reminds me a little bit of the United States right now. When you go to the grocery store, there's not enough food there.
Yeah, it's disturbing. Gas prices are this high. Things are coming. We couldn't even find chicken the other day. Thank God I got a freezer full of them, but Lord.
Yeah. By the way, podcast listeners, Lauren Arakan, who is a millennial, raises and kills her own chickens herself. And then cooks them, which I think is pretty badass. Just saying.
It's true. Everyone should learn to do it. If anybody wants to learn to do it, you just let Mark know. He'll connect us. I can teach you how to cut their heads off.
So next up, podcast listeners, a blue seat has flipped in Florida. Another one. Woo. Okay. Democrats should be worried. Republican flips Florida city council seat in a liberal district. This is in the Western Journal. Republicans snatched a vacant Democratic city council seat in Jacksonville, Florida. Wow. On Tuesday, perhaps signaling what is to come in the November midterm elections. Remember, folks, the greater Jacksonville area is clearly very red and Republican, but the city of Jacksonville is very Democrat. Okay? And this particular city council seat was in the city of Jacksonville, as blue can be, and a Republican won. And before we discuss this with our millennial, Lauren, we have a clip on this, and here it is.
+6 in Duval County. Democrats generally now have a vote by mail advantage, but we figured out how to overcome that. You know how we did it? With grassroots, volunteers from you guys, all the hard work you put in, the tens of thousands of doors, the tens of thousands of calls, waiting, texting. You guys won this race. And you guys showed the rest of Duval, the rest of the state, and a lot of the rest of the leadership council we got.
So look, if this is happening in a blue city, and this is one of those elections that happens, kind of the beginning of the year because it's a special election, what is going to happen in November? I got to wonder.
I know, Mark, I have chills. It's like when I was a kid, my knees would tell me when the rain was coming. My knees are tingling, Mark. The rain is coming. It's going to rain all over that Democrat parade. We are going to kick their butts.
So when millennial knees tingle, it means that we're going to kick the other side's butts.
We're going to win.
Okay.
I can't wait.
All right. And of course, Biden and Harris, we talked about this last time. They're underwater in California. And then the San Francisco mayor admits failure by the school board and by their police, by trying to cancel the police, that is, among all of their other stupid policies. I mean, it's almost like Democrats are coming forward and going, I know, we made a mistake. Don't hold us accountable. It's okay.
Yeah.
And like in a normal little mistake, if the little mistake was, we didn't fix that pothole, and as a result, we had 10 flat tires. Okay, that's a mistake, right? You didn't get to it in a timely manner. That's bad enough. Their mistakes are people are dying.
Yeah, we're burning down police stations and what planet are these? No one's going to forgive them at the ballot box. I'm sorry.
I can only hope.
Yeah, no.
I can only hope. So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. Do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is legalizing tent cities. You heard that correctly. Legalizing tent cities. Making tent cities great again. Making homelessness great again. And that would be a Democrat bill. What a surprise. House Bill 304 in the state of Maryland, introduced by Delegate Sheila S. Ruth. In the Maryland House of Delegates, she introduced House Bill 304, which is to legalize tent cities in the state of Maryland. Well, get this, podcast listeners. We have with us, of course, Delegate Lauren Arakan, who was on the committee listening to this bill. And to just clarify what the bill actually does, Delegate Arakan actually asked a question from one of the advocates of making tent cities great again. We have a clip of this, and then we're going to ask the delegate herself, Delegate Lauren Arakan, some questions about this crazy bill. Here's the clip.
Okay, so I think I'm getting a better picture of it, but I'm just imagining. So last time we were talking a lot about San Francisco, and what you would see was there would be like a business, and on the sidewalk, people would literally have set up. There would be a little walkway still, and people would have set up tents all along the sidewalks around the business. So the only way people could get in was to walk in that small space, but they still left a space so people could still move and they could still get to the business. But essentially the businesses are totally encompassed by tent cities and human feces and all sorts of other things. And I want to make sure I understand this bill will either yes or no allow that to occur in the state of Maryland.
To answer your question, Delegate Eric, and as long as there's free passage, yes, it would allow it.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I knew. Okay.
And if I may,
you can't make this up.
So, Lauren, that was you asking the question.
Yeah.
And this idiot who is an advocate of legalizing tent cities in Maryland, it's like, yeah, we're that's exactly what we want. We want poop and pee on the street, and we want them right outside of your house and your business and wherever they want to go. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. Well, what I told the guy, I said, look, this isn't going to happen, at my house. It's not going to happen at your house, Mark, because we own our properties to the street. But you know where it is going to happen? It's going to happen in blue cities with Democrats, with, poor single mothers who are trying to get into their townhomes, and they got homeless encampments on their, on their front walkway. And he's like, yeah. Rock on, homeless people. Move on in. We'll get you a spot pot. Just kidding. Take a dump on the street. Totally fine. Because that's what's happening.
Again, podcast listeners, this is House Bill 304, introduced by Delegate Sheila S. Ruth of Maryland, legalizing tent cities and making tent cities great again. And literally, they're admitting that they want to do this, that it's okay to poop and pee on the street. And you mentioned private property, right? But the thing is, because I listened to the whole clip, because the clip goes on longer than that, podcast listeners, and we just wanted to abbreviate the clip just so you got the feel of the bill. But here's the thing. People can, even though you own private property up to the road and it's your property and you own it, it doesn't mean right outside of your private property on the sidewalk or on a vacant lot next to you.
That's right.
That they can't do what? They can set up a tent city.
Yeah.
And so they do that. And you're like, well, wait a minute. In order for me to leave my property, I have to go through this stuff. And then all night long, I have to worry that they might, move onto the property and then maybe intentionally try to break into my house and steal food or steal God knows what.
Absolutely. I mean, this, finally the mayor and the governor of New York have decided to move the homeless people out of the subway because guess what, Mark? It's causing crime. It turns out having people in encampments mixed up with people that are just trying to get to work every day can increase the crime. Who would have thought? But let's bring it to Maryland. It's going to make Maryland so much better.
But you know what I find interesting is there's another delegate in Maryland. Her name is Delegate Lehman, and she's from Baltimore City. In Baltimore City, there are like tent cities like everywhere, okay? And Delegate Lehman puts in a bill, and the bill is you cannot leave a dog outside. Okay, if it's cold outside, the dog has to be brought in. If it's raining outside, the dog has to be brought in. And you cannot have an unattended pet outside. But she's okay with the unattended human beings being outside in Baltimore City living on the street.
Yeah. Dogs can't crap outside. Humans can. These are the new rules.
But you have to clean up the dog poop when you walk your dog.
Of course.
If you're a human being, you can poop right on the street, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
Once again, it's making it great again.
Yeah, equality.
So this even made, Lauren, the Washington Free Beacon, okay? And it says a Maryland state bill would prevent police from removing homeless camps from public property. Some of the nation's most liberal cities are cracking down on their homeless populations, but Maryland may soon ban police from removing homeless people from public property. A Democratic bill in the Maryland State House would prevent police from enforcing failure to obey lawful order laws. And the bill just goes on and talks about that very thing, which is in Baltimore City. You have homeless people, and yet you have them everywhere, obviously, but in Baltimore City in particular. And these are the people that can least afford to live in areas and have more danger for their children. Their children walk out the front door of their tent city.
Yeah, it's scary. Can you even imagine still living down there? I mean, it's not a place I even take my kids anymore, which is really sad. It used to be a place I spent my money.
It is.
And it's not a place I spend my money anymore.
It is. So podcast listeners, I want you to hear this clip again, okay? Listen to how honest they are about what their intentions are and how they want to destroy the community that you live in. We have that clip again. Here it is.
Okay, so I think I'm getting a better picture of it, but I'm just imagining. So last time we were talking a lot about San Francisco, and what you would see was there would be like a business, and on the sidewalk, people would literally have set up. There would be a little walkway still, and people would have set up tents all along the sidewalks around the business. So the only way people could get in was to walk in that small space, but they still left a space so people could still move and they could still get to the business. But essentially, the businesses are totally encompassed by tent cities and human feces and all sorts of other things. And I want to make sure I understand this bill will either yes or no allow that to occur in the state of Maryland.
To answer your question, Delegate Eric, and as long as there's free passage, yes, it would allow it.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I knew.
I mean, this tells you this is the Democrat Party and their operatives and their advocates.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is your future, okay?
This is your utopia.
This is your utopia. People living in tents on the street. So once again, that was Lauren Aricon asking that question, but the sponsor is Sheila Ruth. And so I pull up her website and there's of course that little tab when you pull up a website and it says about Sheila. Here's what she says. I bring to this work a deep passion for justice and a commitment to improve the lives of district residents and all Marylanders. Before becoming a delegate, I was an activist working on issues such as racial equity, climate justice, fair democracy, immigrant rights, transit equity, and a living wage. I was a lead organizer in the coalition that worked to pass Baltimore County Home Act to prohibit housing discrimination by source of income. So let's stop right there.
Oh, I hated that bill.
This delegate Ruth as she says, she's a lead organizer in the coalition, that worked to pass the Baltimore County Home Act to prohibit housing discrimination by source of income. So as a result of her great policies, we now have homeless encampments because they're not about economic growth and economic opportunity and lifting people up. It's about bringing people down and everybody with them.
Oh, yeah. She's a full-on socialist. I mean, this is disturbing stuff. I had no idea she was behind that other bill. That bill is terrible. It made me want to sell my rental property in Baltimore County because who wants to be forced to take housing vouchers? You have to be able to decide who you want living in your home. What is wrong with these people? This is their utopia.
Well, pretty soon we'll have vouchers for 10 cities, Will you accept vouchers on your property for 10 cities?
No, too bad. We make you. You must.
Exactly. And even though they've moved on your property, the police cannot come there and remove them.
Squatters' rights.
Exactly. Squatters' rights. It's a new law. So
it's just so disturbing.
Final word on this bill. What were your thoughts? Final word when you're in committee.
I get disturbed when I see my colleagues nodding. There's like a whole Zoom call of all these nodding heads like they agree with what's going on. Meanwhile, the rest of us are thinking, this isn't the place I want to raise my children. And then where's the tax base going to go? If I leave and you leave and we all leave, who's paying for all this crap?
Also, this hearing was on Zoom. I have to say this before we close this. The hearing was on Zoom, so it looked like the Brady Bunch. How you have all the little heads on Zoom and all that stuff. So there's the sponsor of the bill, which is, of course, Delegate Ruth. And then you have all of the advocates. And so when she's giving her testimony or when the advocates are giving their testimony, they're all going, and they're a bunch of adults. They're like, yeah, that's right. 10 cities are really the future of America. Oh, yes.
Bobbleheads. So embarrassing. Yeah, who raised these people?
Exactly. Who knows? Yeah. And that's the dumbest bill in America. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you for joining us, of course. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins, and to our guest, Lauren Aricon. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.